You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, it's the NEC preview coming at you. We got 9 teams in the conference this year. Let me run them through you, make sure, because there's been some upheaval in and out. Let me get you set up. Let me give you these 9 teams in alphabetical order. Number 1, Central Connecticut. And then 2, Fairleigh Dickinson. I think you are familiar with at least them. LIU, Long Island University, Merrimack, Sacred Heart, St. Francis, Pennsylvania, although unfortunately I don't have to give you that designation anymore, just St. Francis. And then Stonehill, Wagner, and Moyne. I put them last because they're the brand new babies into the NCAA Division I ranks. Major storylines for the NEC. Let's get to it. Fairleigh Dickinson. I already kind of referenced it. You're familiar with what happened last year, making history, the second ever 16 seed to knock off a number 1. That's Purdue, who is looking to come back in a major way themselves this year. FDU loses quite a bit, including their head coach. Can they repeat? Can they come back? They actually didn't even win the NEC tournament last year. That was Merrimack, but Merrimack wasn't eligible for the NCAA tournament, so FDU gets in and then does that work. Can they make it happen again? We'll find out. Major storyline number 2. Sacred Heart is the consensus number 1 team in this conference, but here's the deal. They have never made the NCAA tournament. Is this the year? Going to be something to watch out for. So that a lot of pressure to both lock down the whole conference regular season, win that, and remember, in one bid leagues, you got to win the conference tournament to make it in. So we'll be watching Sacred Heart to see if they can do that. Next major storyline, it's an NEC stunner. Unfortunately, St. Francis Brooklyn, this is why I said we don't have to give you the Pennsylvania designation anymore, shut down their athletics department at the end of last academic year. They had been in the NEC for 42 years, and unfortunately now it is gone. Hate that for that entire athletics department. Next up, I said it already, but the newest member of Division I, welcome in the Moyne. Anybody know their nickname? It's an awesome one. Dolphins, the Moyne Dolphins, just right there close to Syracuse. Newest member of Division I college basketball. So sitting at 362. Now, here's the cool thing for the Dolphins. Good news. Ken Palm does not have them ranked as the lowest team in Division I. That dubious distinction, I'll call it, goes to Mississippi Valley State. So Moyne coming in ranked number 361 at Ken Palm, and some computer outlets I've seen have them even a little bit higher. It's a very veteran team. We'll get to that in a little bit. Now, I mentioned there are 9 teams in the NEC. One of the next storylines is that only 7 of those 9, similar to last year, are eligible for the NCAA tournament. Here's why. You might or might not be aware that when a team joins Division I, they have a 4-year transition period in which they can play games, but they cannot participate in any postseason tournaments, meaning NCAA or NIT, which are both of those postseason tournaments are run by the NCAA. So Moyne obviously can't participate in the NCAA tournament this year. It's their first year, so they will be eligible in 2027-28 after a 4-year transition period. The other that is ineligible right now is Stonehill. This is their second year in Division I, so they're going to be eligible in 2026-27. However, one thing that is kind of cool for these 2 teams is that the NEC higher-ups voted a couple off seasons ago, and these teams, even though they're not eligible for the NCAA tournament, can compete in the NEC conference tournament. So that's pretty cool. And here's why that comes into play. Last year, as I said, Merrimack actually won the NEC tournament, but it didn't matter because they couldn't go to the NCAA tournament. So that meant then that FDU was in, and boy, did they make good use of that opportunity. So Merrimack, though, is now eligible. They've paid their 4 years of dues, and now they're ready to go. And it's kind of comical because they've had really good success in the NEC in these first 4 years. They won the regular season their first year. They won the regular season last year, and then they won the conference tournament last year, the only time they've been able to play it. That was the first year that the NEC has allowed the transitioning schools to play in the conference tournament. So pretty cool for Merrimack, although this year they fall off a little bit, at least on paper. So would be neat to see them rise up in their first year. One kind of two more storylines that kind of tie together is that this conference, the NEC, and it makes sense when you think about all the transitional schools and going out. This conference was dead last at Ken Palm last year, 32nd of all the D1 conferences. Part of that is why FDU over Purdue is such a stunner, because the Big Ten as a conference is ranked so high and the NEC as a conference is ranked so low. I mean, it just is what it is. And the Ken Palm rankings for this year now are out. If you haven't seen those, make sure you check them out. But it projects to be the same. Ken Palm this year has the NEC projected as the lowest ranked conference in D1. Here's partly why. When you look at the 9 teams that make up the Ken Palm rankings, here's where they sit in the preseason rankings at Ken Palm ahead of this year. Of the 9 teams, only 2 of them land in the top 300 schools. And that is just barely. Sacred Heart, the team that I said is the consensus #1 team in this conference, 286th at Ken Palm. Only Wagner is the other team in the top 300, and they're 295th. The other 7 teams in this conference are all in the bottom 53 teams in all of Division I at Ken Palm. So unfortunately, it makes a lot of sense when you hear that makeup that the NEC is right there at the bottom. Last year, already said it, Merrimack won the regular season. Fairleigh Dickinson and Stonehill were in second place, 2 games back. And then we've already talked about the conference tournament. And so we'll see what happens this year with all of that. In terms of coaching, only 1 coaching change, interestingly enough. That was with the FDU. Obviously, we know Tobin Anderson went on to replace, anybody remember? Rick Pitino at Iona, because he's now at St. John's back in the Big East. So Jack Castleberry comes in to be the head coach now at FDU. I say comes in, I should say moves up, because he was an assistant last year at FDU after several years at the Citadel before that. In terms of the longest tenured coaches in the NEC, you've got Rob Krimmel at St. Francis, has been there since 2012-13 season. So, over a decade by a couple years. And then Anthony Latina at Sacred Heart and Chris Krause, I like to call him Chris Cross, at Stonehill, have been there since the 2013-14 season, both of those guys. So just over 10 years now. All right, speaking of all these teams, we got to get into ranking them, putting them in an order, and I want to hand out my predictions and my conference champions. All of that is going to come to you in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Got to switch that hat to the Bird Dogs hat. Oh, you know it. Look at that awesome white hat. Look at this little tumbler from Bird Dogs. You love it, man. They give you all the great stuff. I just went on a weekend getaway with my family. We went to a cabin last weekend, and I wore my Bird Dogs pants because I thought, I think these Bird Dogs pants are going to be perfect for a fall weekend getaway. And you know what? They absolutely were. I wore them out on a hike we went on. I wore them into town for lunch, and I wore them just back at the cabin later as we're just hanging out at the campfire and watching college football, just being chill. And they truly were perfect for any of these occasions. And that's what makes Bird Dogs awesome. And not only are they functional, but Bird Dogs legitimately make you look and feel good. I feel so confident when I'm wearing my Bird Dogs pants. Plus, right now, with every Bird Dogs purchase, you get a water bottle. Don't miss out on doing it. And beyond the great fit, beyond the creative fabric, I love Bird Dogs because they have this anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric. It keeps you cool and dry all day long. So as I was walking around with my family last weekend, I felt great. And I knew that I didn't smell bad either because of that anti-stink stuff. Way to go, Bird Dogs, and thank you. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code lockedoncollege at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. Again, that's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take off your Bird Dogs. We promise you that. All right, we're getting back to our NEC preseason preview. Typically what we do right now is I'll rank these teams into tiers. I'll tier them out together, but with only 9 teams, I just actually want to do a 1 to 9 ranking. Let me put them in what I think is going to be the order, and then I want you to rip it up, tear it up, and let me know what you think. But here we go. Let's start at the bottom and work our way up. At the bottom, it's not Moyne. It is not the newcomers to D1. They're too experienced and too loaded. I unfortunately have St. Francis at number 9, and then Moyne at number 8. Shocker, D1's newest member will not finish in the cellar. And a lot of the guys, again, it's because of experience. They, like, if the starting 5 is what I think it'll be, 4 grad students and a senior. That's wild. So we'll see on that. Number 7, I have LIU, Long Island University. 6, Stonehill. 5, Merrimack. 4, Central Connecticut. 3, Wagner. 2, Fairleigh Dickinson. And my number 1 team, we already talked about it, is Sacred Heart. I kind of feel like there's this, maybe this dividing line after Central Connecticut, where I think Sacred Heart seems to be in a tier by themselves. And if I was tiering it out, I'd put FDU, Wagner, and Central Connecticut all together in tier 2. But I feel like you're going to get those 3 teams, 2 through 4, in some order. But I have it Fairleigh Dickinson, Wagner, Central Connecticut. All right, let's get to my first team, all NEC. And we actually have several guys coming back, which is incredible, and I love it. First on this team is the lone, I got to switch my hats back. Our lone returner from last year's first team, Nico Galette from Sacred Heart, a 6'6" senior forward, 15.4 points a game last year, 6.7 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 1.8 steals, and a block. Good grief. This dude's filling up the stat line. You love to see it. I expect those numbers to grow even more this year, and we will see how that turns out. Number 2 on my list is Kellen Amos from Central Connecticut, the lone returner from last year's second team all NEC. 6'7" senior guard / forward, 14.1 points a game last year, 3.4 boards, 1.3 assists, and averaged 35 from 3. Love to see that. Love him getting out. I've got him making that jump from second team to first team. Next is last year's most improved player in the conference who was part of the third team, and that's Ainsley Almanor from Fairleigh Dickinson. 6'7" junior forward, 13.6 points a game last year, 4.8 boards, 1.8 assists, shot 38% from 3. Kind of similar to what I'm loving with Kellen Amos there. But want to see Almanor continue that upward trajectory, but I expect it, especially as Fairleigh Dickinson is needing guys to step into some of these leadership roles. I'm watching for that with Almanor. Next, out of Stonehill, who was also on the third team last year, is Max Zegorowski. If that last name sounds familiar to you, it should, because it is familiar to college basketball. You might remember Marcus Zegorowski from Creighton a couple years ago. These dudes are twins. Max is a 6'8" graduate student forward. Last year, 12.6 points a game, 4.2 boards, 1.2 assists, and shot over 40% from 3. Last year did Max Zegorowski. And so really neat and really excited to see what he can do for Stonehill this year. Maybe even move them up higher than I thought they would be. And then rounding out my first team, all NEC, is Jordan Durkic, from Merrimack. He's a phenomenal defender. I wouldn't be surprised if he's named Defender of the Year. But in addition to that, he's a 6'5" sophomore guard, 7.4 points a game last year, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 2.1 steals. And so doing a lot of that good stuff. That's, again, me coming back to him being a defender. Now, he is not a shooter. Shot 22% from 3 last year, just 36 attempts, but still needs to grow in that to really, truly explode this year. For player of the year, I've got Nico Galette from Sacred Heart. I expect best player on the best team. That's what you got there. There's some other dudes at Sacred Heart, but I've got Galette right at the top of it. In terms of my freshman of the year, I'm going with Bud Clark. I love this dude. I love this name. Give me Bud Clark. Is 5'10" guard out of West Catholic High School in Pennsylvania. For my runner-up, if there was a second, I was debating between these guys. I would go with Carlos Lopez Jr. from St. Francis. For my transfer of the year, I'm going with Melvin Council Jr. coming over from Monroe College. Expect to see good things out of him this year, and I think he will be a great player. In fact, could be the most NBA potential of this conference. We'll wait to see on that. And then for my coach of the year, I got Anthony Latina from Sacred Heart. I think they're going to do it. I say the Pioneers get it done, and that puts Coach Latina in prime position to win this award. And so then it becomes as no surprise that I've got Sacred Heart as both my regular season and conference tournament champ, moving on to that first ever NCAA tournament in program history. You know the excitement will be electric with that. Can't wait to keep tabs on what happens in the Northeast. Thanks for making Locked On College basketball your first listen to the watch of the day. It's been a great week to be together. Can't wait for our last week of conference previews next week. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On CBB. Follow me at Isaac Shade. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show on audio and video format. Smash the like button and leave comments on your thoughts on the NEC and this whole thing with Oklahoma State we talked about earlier. Apologies to the lawyer family. Go Wildcats, and until Monday, peace.